have no doubt.
Hey everyone, my guest today is the award-winning playwright, screenwriter, TV writer, and producer, John Tolins. John is the author of many plays, including Buyer and Cellar, Secrets of the Trade, If Memory Serves, The Last Sunday in June, and Twilight of the Golds. Some of his many television credits include Grease Live, Queer as Folk, Martian Child, Partners, Braindead, The Good Fight, East New York, Schmigadoon, and of course, Elsbeth, the hit show that he is the showrunner and exec producer of. He's written award shows and musicals and so much more, but I'm going to stop reading about him so I can talk to him. Welcome the glorious John Tolins to the podcast. Hey,
Thank you. You left out the fact that we're related.
well, that was going to be my little known fact.
Oh, okay. All right.
No, but
Sorry.
let's
I
start
blew
with
it.
that. You didn't blow it. There's no blowing it. I feel like I'm so proud to be able to tell people that I am your cousin, especially when I really sat down and like did a deep dive into your career, which is decades old now and sort of spans so many genres and themes. Um, I want to let's go back in time and then we'll end up with like the glorious Elsbeth Tassioni played by Cary Preston in this show that's just so special. And for a theater lover like me and every single one of my listeners, every Easter egg has been delightful. Um, so I do know you personally. I can picture your bar mitzvah like it happened yesterday. It was so glamorous and exciting and New York centric. Um, when did you find, like, I love writing, I'm really good at writing, I have a unique comedic voice, I can handle any genre. When did you know, like, I'm a writer?
Well, I was always the kid who wrote the skit. Like if there was something that we had to do something, I would be the one to write it. And I
Mm.
don't remember deciding that. I do remember once after something happened at my summer camp, I started writing a story about it, and I never finished it, but I still have the first like 10 pages. So I always have that impulse. But the real thing is, I wrote to make shows, and the change to being a playwright happened when I was a freshman in college. I went to Harvard and they would cast all the shows at the same time. It was called common casting, and you would audition for everything. And I auditioned for everything and got cast in nothing. And, I had been like the star at my high school, and this was a real blow. And I had like done forensics and things like that. So I was so upset. That night, I started writing my first play, which was a play called The Unveiling. The next day, I got cast in three things because it turned out all the shows had cast the same actor, Chris Moore, who actually just did a guest spot for me on Elsbeth. So, that's how life is,
Yeah,
it was great. I love Chris.
that was
And
very generous of you under the circumstances.
yeah, but I took his leftovers, but then I finished the play and I used it to get into I worked on it in a seminar. I can't remember if I finished it before or after the seminar, but I got into a seminar, a playwriting seminar with William Alfred, who was a professor at Harvard, who had written the play Hogan's Goat, which was the play that made Faye Dunaway a star. And then Faye ended up kind of playing my mother in the movie of The Twilight of the Golds, and she liked me for a minute because of the William Alfred connection. Anyway, so that was really it. And then, I tried to be an actor kind of when I got out of college, but I also writing was something I always felt like I had a good ear. And part of that is because I was always someone who told jokes and could remember jokes and would tell them a lot. In fact, when I taught screenwriting at USC, the first thing I would have everyone do is have to come in and tell a joke or tell a personal story because writing is really Chris Durang said it's managing other people's time. And when you tell a joke, you want to include only the details that are going to help you get the biggest laugh. And you want to keep everything else out unless it really helps the journey of the joke. And you also, when you tell a joke, feel the pressure of everybody looking at you and waiting to hear how this is going to turn out. And really, writing anything is sort of that expanded over a longer form. That's a very long answer, but that's how I kind of became a writer.
This is a long form podcast. This is the point of this podcast. I don't want sound bites. I really want to know sort of deeply the origin story of the creatives who come on the show because it's my favorite thing to talk
Well,
about, actually.
the other thing I should mention is that I was very lucky. I grew up, as you know, in a very supportive family and a family that had some means, and we lived on Long Island, and my parents took me to the theater. And once they created a monster, and I would demand that they take me to the theater. But I saw my first Broadway show, No No Nanette, when I was 7 years old, and I also went to the opera that same year. If you watch Elsbeth, at the end of Elsbeth, my production company is called Nemorino Productions. Nemorino is the tenor character in the opera The Elixir of Love, L'Elisa d'Amore, which was the first opera I ever saw. And my logo is a drawing of me at 7 at the opera. What's amazing is that that logo, which was drawn by Jamie McMahon, who I met on Schmigadoon, um, that logo appeared 50 years to the day that my father took me to the opera for the first time, which was odd.
Was your dad, so John's father and my father were cousins, but also best friends. I mean, they really were incredibly connected beyond the demands of family reunions and satyrs. And I wonder where your father's, because my father was not steeped in opera or culture in that way. Definitely like loved musicals and loved music. Um, but talk about, because opera, when I think of you as a young person, obviously today it remains so front and center in the world of John Tolin's passions, and it is so beautifully woven into some themes of Elsbeth even.
Mhm.
But for a 7-year-old to kind of get excited about opera, that's not usual. So talk about like, why was your dad taking you at 7? Like, why did you know about the ring cycle before anybody else?
Um, my grandparents actually shared a box with some other friends, and they were yeah, educators, teachers, and my grandfather was an assistant principal as well as a gym teacher. But that was something that they was important to them. And my father loved the music and had records that he played. And at 7, I think it was my mother's mother, Grandma Ruth, who really said that they should take me to the theater and to the opera because I think she sensed in me that I was this is a coming out story, but she was someone who sensed that I would appreciate it.
Yeah.
I also there was a ritual about it with my father that it was very special to me. My father would always read me the story from the Milton Cross Stories of the Great Operas book before we went, and then we would go together. And after a few years, again, they created a monster, and my parents would just drop me off at things they didn't want to sit through. But there were a few operas that my father and I had a special affection for, particularly Un ballo in Maschera. My father and I once went to see Un ballo in Maschera 3 times in 10 days. Twice with Carla Bergonzi, once with Placido Domingo. So that and so it was something that, in addition to me just loving the art form and really responding to it, it was something that I did with my dad.
Right.
Yeah.
That's incredible. I was remembering an interview and I found it again because you talked about when, as a play, Byron Cellar really, I mean, Twilight of the Golds, right out of the gate, you write this play, it gets made into a movie. I think the cast wasn't just Faye Dunaway, it was like Gary Marshall and Jack Klugman and Jennifer Beals and John Tenney, who was a friend of mine,
Yeah.
at the time,
And Brendan,
and
Oscar winner
Brendan
Brendan
Fraser,
Fraser.
who was actually extraordinary in your movie. Everyone, it's the most unbelievable cast, and it is sort of a great. The premise was really unique in it and in its time, a brand new thought. The premise of Twilight of the Golds, for anyone who hasn't seen it or known it, is basically what if there was a genetic test and you found out your kid was going to be gay? Nowadays, I feel like I can't imagine it being shocking to anyone to see a play or watch a movie where that's the theme. But in its day, it was really like a revolutionary concept. Um, and very moving. And also as a cousin, like, oh my God, did you hear John's play? Is now a movie with that stacked cast. It was pretty incredible.
Well, I always said if you want your family to accept you when you come out, write a Broadway play about it. Because whatever whatever problems we were having, once the title of my play was up in lights over the Booth Theater,
That's it.
Nachas
That's
trumped
it.
all. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
we're so glad. We wanted him to be gay. Are you
yeah,
kidding?
yeah.
We're so proud. And that's obviously part of your story and many people's stories is navigating uh, parents who grew up in a certain community, in a certain world where this seemed to be a brand new concept to them and sort of navigating that. And those themes are obviously, whether directly addressed in Twilight of the Gold. It's not literally your family story, but the idea of what does it take to feel accepted and the growth that has to happen by everyone around you. But just this idea of being out and gay in the world and writing characters that are out and quite happy in their lives. And Buyer and Cellar is so extraordinary because for those of you who don't know about that play, it's about someone who works in, the famous Barbara Streisand mall that she has in her basement. And the character's name is Alex in that play, if I recall. And I
Yes.
don't mean to tell you about what your work is, but you said in that play, an interview about it, that that Barbara's character, even though it's a one-man show, is incredibly impactful in terms of giving Alex kind of permission to follow his dreams, to be ambitious, to be who he wants to be and not be afraid of it, fail or win, go for it. And I wonder, this is a long way away to ask, like, who was the Barbara Streisand in your life who gave you the key to say, I I want to do this?
Huh. Um, This is it's odd, but I've had several very important mentors in my life, and I actually wrote a play about it called Secrets of the Trade. But I have to say, I just always knew I wanted it so bad, and I just thought, this is what I'm doing. This is what I have to do. So it was more a question of me seeking out the mentors that on some level, some unconscious level, I needed to find. Um, but there's a line in that play where this mentor, the mother of this kid, goes to the famous mentor and says, "I want to be part of this. I want to," and the mentor says, you can't do that for him. You can't give him what I can give him." And so, what is that? And he says, permission, permission to be himself as fully as possible.
Mm,
And I think, what that play is about a kid who writes a letter to a famous Broadway writer director. And really what it is that when you have someone who has quote unquote made it or is somewhat important, who gives you the kind of attention that says you have validity, you have potential, you can do this, it means everything. When you're a kid at that age, and I had a few people like that. I mean, so I wrote that play. I'll tell. I've told other people, but the relationship in that play that's most like was my relationship with James Levine, whose life ended in disgrace. And looking back on it, you know, my experience of my knowing him wasn't dissimilar to what other people would have described as grooming with other people. It never went to that place with me in terms of anything shocking, probably because he could tell that I came from a very stable, solid, supportive family, that things could not happen. Anyway, who knows what was going on in his head. But when I wrote that play, I had so many people come to me and say, "This is exactly the experience I had with," put any famous theater person or
right.
artistic person in the end of that sentence. It's a very common thing. I mean, didn't Hal Prince write a letter to George Abbott, and that's how his life began? But
Right.
I think it's not. At one point, the kid says to Martin Kerner, the mentor, in that, he says, "How did you know? How did you know I was gay? How did you know I was not all this kind of thing? Was it my letter?" And he says, "No, it's you knew to find me."
Mm,
I think that, kids like I was, you have this internal drive just because of you reacting to what you get to see and just know that you want to be a part of it so badly that you find the people who will give you the permission you're seeking so you can follow that dream, I think.
Were you a pretty confident kid?
I was confident in what I could do.
Hmm.
I knew I could write and I could act and stuff like that. I wasn't confident socially. I mean, partly because I was just dealing with my private feelings of being different. Um, I was not like, I used to say in high school I wasn't really popular, but I was respected. Like they might not invite me to a party, but they'd elect me class president, that kind of thing, you
Right,
know.
right.
Um, so but again, I fully recognize how incredibly fortunate I was in the family I was born into and where I grew up and the ability to do the kinds of things and that I like to do and the friends I made, who were incredible and still friends to this day.
So when you look back, so playwriting was your entree into show business, as it
Mhm.
were. Was Twilight being adapted to a screenplay and you being a part of that process, did that open up television opportunities for you, or had TV writing already started for you?
No, TV didn't come over. What happened was I had a writing partner named Seth Bass, and we wrote a spec pilot and some spec scripts, and we had a lot of meetings, and we were very, very popular with TV producers who couldn't get their shows on the air. So we were always like, if we get a pickup, you're going to get a job. I'm sorry, and um, and it's a show running, and so. Uh, Twilight of the Golds changed all that.
Yeah.
Um, and suddenly my agent said, like, people are asking, will they do TV? And it's like, well, you had your chance for 4 years. We were trying to do TV because,
Yeah, yeah.
and so what happened was after Twilight, Hollywood Pictures hired us to write the film adaptation and also made a deal on two other, like rewrites for them. And Seth and I did very well, doing a lot of, rewrites, production. We sold some pitches and things like that for a number of years. My first real TV job was Queer as Folk in 2000 when I worked on the first season of that. And that was without Seth. And and then I was hired by Max Mushnick and David Cohan to work on their show Partners in, I believe, 2012, which is while I was finishing Buyer and Cellar. And the star of Partners, co-star of Partners was Michael Urie. And that's when Michael and I became very close friends. Um, and then Buyer and Cellar was a big deal, and I got to do a lot of fun things based on that. And then after that, the Kings, Robert and Michelle King, asked me to work on a summer show called Braindead, and that lasted only one season. But then they asked me to work on The Good Fight, and so that's really it wasn't until then that my regular work in TV began. I
Was
had some
being in a
lean
writer's
years in the
room.
middle there. Yeah.
Okay, well, I don't think I saw you then. I waited. Twilight of the Golds, did it start off Broadway or in LA and then come to Broadway, or was it right
No, it
away?
it premiered at the Pasadena Playhouse,
Okay, I remember the
and
LA
and
part.
and Pasadena had a little thing for a few years. They would do their shows in Pasadena and then in San Diego and then Santa Barbara. So we like kind of a little tour. And then the producer, Charles Duggan, commercial producer, we did it in at the Kennedy Center, which I'll still call the Kennedy Center in Washington, and then we played at the Marines Memorial in San Francisco, and then a week at the Paramount Theater in Austin, Texas, before moving to Broadway. And we were a huge deal when we were in LA. I mean, I really was like it for a few minutes. And that's when it sold to the movies, and you couldn't get a ticket. Famous people like Barbara came to see it, which is mentioned in Buyer and Cellar, and Jeffrey Katzenberg came with Warren Beatty and Annette Bening. It was like one of those exciting things. And then we opened in New York, and we were destroyed by the critics, Ben Brantley chief among them. And I always say, it was an incredibly painful experience, but I think in some ways it put me in good stead psychologically and emotionally in this business because I went through great success and humiliating failure within 10 months with the same thing.
Right.
And so you really learn that on some level, it's all arbitrary, and you just have to do the best you can. And sometimes it's going to go your way and sometimes it isn't.
Can you just talk about, I touched on it briefly, sort of the idea of Barbara Streisand has a mall of all of her collections of things in her basement. Um, so first of all, she came to Twilight of the Golds.
Hmm.
Did you meet her at that time?
I did. I think this is talked about in Byron Cellar. She came because she was considering buying the film rights of the Twilight of the Gold. And then she decided she took forever to decide, and then Hollywood Pictures bought them instead. Um, and so I met her in the courtyard. She offered me a piece of her Kit Kat bar, and I didn't take it because I was afraid I would make a mess. And as Alex says in the play, and to this day, he regrets not taking it. But then no one cares about him, is what they say about me. And so that was the only time we met, and we never met again after that. I have corresponded. I have spoken. Her manager called me. Her publicist came to see the play in New York, and I've had communications with them. And I wrote a letter to Barbara at one point, but I've never heard from her.
So when were you like, wait, I actually have a really genius idea for a play?
Cary, my husband, Robert Cary, for those of you following us professionally, brought home her book, My
Hmm.
Passion for Design, from the library in 2010, I guess is when it came out. And we were looking through it and looking at the chapter, which has all the pictures of the underground mall in her basement. And I said, how'd you like to be the guy who works down there? And that was really a funny idea. And
Yeah.
so I wrote a 2-page essay that is the diary of the guy who gets that job, and he's fired at the end of the week because I don't know, his teeth don't match the right color or whatever.
Oh
And
my
um,
God.
and I submitted it to the New Yorker through my best friend from high school is a literary agent, and he submitted it to the New Yorker. They rejected it. But my good friend Craig Gartner is a manager, and Craig manages Jesse Tyler Ferguson, and he loved that essay, that humor piece, and he said you should write this as a one-man show for Jesse. And I remember thinking, oh, that's the kind of thing that 5 years from now I'll think I should have done that.
Hmm.
So I started work on it. I read some Barbara biographies. Not that I had to do a lot of research into Barbara because, I'm Jewish and gay. I knew a lot.
Yeah.
And I worked on it probably about a year. And I just kept working on it and it became more and more real to me. So I really believed in the details. Almost every detail in that play comes from something I found in that book. Yeah, and I knew it was the minute people started reading it, the reaction was very like excited. The people in
Yeah.
LA, like everyone wanted to meet me and all that. So I knew that it was a really good idea. The question was, could it ever get produced because of the legal threat?
Right.
And my lawyers, I let them read it after like the first 25 pages, and they said no one will ever produce this play because she is famously litigious and no producer will take the risk. But I still finished the script because I loved it, and I thought, well, you know what? Worst case scenario, people will pass it around in Hollywood, and maybe I'll,
Yeah.
I'll get a job because I really needed a job at that point. Uh, and then we just got lucky in that I had done the last Sunday in June at Rattlestick Theater off Broadway, and I sent and once Jesse was unavailable, and he said if you can find someone else to do it with, go ahead. I was already friends with Michael Yuri, and I let him read it, and Michael really wanted to do it, and I asked Michael if I could use his name, so I sent the script to David Van Asselt at Rattlestick, and another show fell out right at that point. And also, David had produced the Rattlestick had done the play 3C, I think it's called, which was about Three's Company. It was a parody of Three's Company, and they had gotten sued by Paramount or something. And they had gone through this whole battle, and they tried to take the rights and all that. And David was like spoiling for a fight because he believed in fair use and parody, and at that
Right.
level. And so he said, "We'll do it." And we managed to get a little enhancement money, but it was more like a contribution to the theater, so we could afford to do it. And we just, what we decided was we had to do it in a way that did not announce it had anything to do with Barbra Streisand. We couldn't use her likeness in the advertising. The title didn't mention her. We didn't talk about her. And basically, our philosophy was, well, if it's bad, it'll disappear. She'll never hear about it. And if it's really great and it catches fire, then, she's not going to want to shut it down because that'll just make her look bad.
Right.
And so that's what happened. Her publicist, one of her publicists, or maybe her main publicist, Ken Sunshine, came to see the show, and I was there that night. And he came out with like this stunned look on his face after, and he said, "It's incredible, it's amazing." And I said, "Well, if she asks, what will you say?" And he says, "If
Yeah.
she asks, she's going to call me in 5 minutes." And I said, I'm going to tell her, Barbara, it's wonderful. It's not for you."
Hmm.
So, I have to say, she's been very gracious about it. She has done interviews where she's mentioned it and says how she can't go see it because it's too, whatever, maybe, I don't know, personal to her. And she never did sue me. We got one angry letter when we were at the taper where another publicist asked us to change a line, and I explained why I wouldn't, and that was it.
Well, listeners, if you listen to my episode with Michael Urie, you will get to hear his channeling of Barbara Streisand because he can't help but fall into it a little bit. It's so natural for him and brilliant. Um, Over the years, you have written on, as we discussed, like a lot, or I mentioned, a lot of different shows with all of these beautiful plays that came out of you as well. And somehow, in talking about relationships, like you get into consistently, you're in these writers' rooms, and then you get to work with the Kings more than once and their shows, this husband and wife duo that have created hours and hours and hours of television for
And I've
viewers.
been friends with them for over 30 years. We first met when my ex, Mark, volunteered on the AIDS hotline in LA, and Michelle was also a volunteer. And that's how, and we used to spend New Year's week. We would rent a house up in Santa Barbara. There was a group of like 10 friends, including Bill Brockdrup, the actor you may know, who was in my play Secrets of the Trade.
Yeah.
And so I've known them a very, very long time. And I never worked with them until I guess 2016 was when I did Brain Dead. I said they were vetting me for decades. Yeah.
Yeah, and you passed the
Yeah.
vet test. Um, It's always a fascinating thing to me. I'm friends with a few showrunners and talking to them about running a room and how they choose to run a room. Everyone's like, best idea wins. I mean, there's certain things that people discuss, but they also talk about sort of the rooms they were in that they were like, I will never do it like this, and rooms that they were in that were really inspiring to them and helpful in how they do it. So, maybe for the few people listening who don't know what a showrunner does and what running a writer's room looks like, uh, some of your work has, happened during COVID, which was a whole other way of setting up rooms. It's all been remote. And I feel like in a way you've continued to do it that
Mhm.
way. Can you talk a little bit about that and who sort of have you taken with you in the wonderful way, as opposed to I feel really small in this room?
I don't want to name names about, situations where I wasn't pleased with how a showrunner ran the
Yes,
show.
yes,
But I will
exactly.
say that there were times that, I thought, if I were ever in that job, I would do it this way. And I feel like all of those things that I'm doing that I thought I would prefer, I feel I was right about. Now, maybe not in every situation for other people, but for me, our
Hmm.
writer's room is working the way I hoped it would, doing the things that I thought should be done. Um, I'll tell you, I had the good fortune of working on Schmigadoon with Cinco Paul, and that was the thing about the great advantage of Schmigadoon was that we wrote the entire series before it was shot. So it's a
Wow.
slightly different job because
Yeah.
we're on, I always say, like, we're Lucy and Ethel at the chocolate conveyor belt, because once it
Trying to get
starts,
these
you
scripts
can't
out.
stop.
Yeah.
Um, a few of the things that I do that I believe strongly in. I say when I say believe strongly, Laura Benanti plays Nadine, the supermodel on Elsbeth, and her catchphrase is "I believe strongly." So I feel funny saying it. But anyway, um, I don't have my writer's room meet much without me present. I think that one of the things that's really hard when you're a writer on a show is when the writers have to work a lot without the showrunner present, and then the showrunner comes in and says, "No, no, no, that doesn't work." and you've just spent 3 days on something like that. I also feel that the reason it helps that I'm present so much is that I end up not rewriting the scripts as much. Because I'm in the process from the very beginning and the whole way. By the time we get to the full draft, I've gotten what I wanted. And then also the writer gets to feel ownership, and they don't see it taken away from them. Because I've been on many shows where, scripts you write are completely rewritten top to bottom, and you just you don't put in the same level of passion because you think, well, what does it matter anyway?
Right. It's so
Yeah.
demoralizing
Yeah.
in that way.
I don't, we never gang write an episode. I've been on many shows where you break the story of the episode together, but then you split it up and everyone's assigned a little piece of it. And then the writer of record will take all that and put it and write the script, and put it all together. I don't do that for two reasons. One, again, I feel it's you don't put in your best work if you because you don't feel it is as important. But also, Elsbeth wouldn't work that way because every one of our episodes is sort of a new world that we introduce, so a new slice
Right.
of New York life. And so I really want a writer or a team, a writing team, to take ownership of that episode, to really dig into the details and the feel of it, and give you sort of a new uniform adventure and attitude toward this slice of New York life that we're exploring. And so then my writers are really happy. I gotta say, um,
It's so great.
we meet on Zoom, but we do always do at least 2 weeks in person in the boot camp. We have two writers right now in California, so came out and we do that. And at this point, because we work together so much, being on Zoom isn't really that much of a handicap. We also we only work 4 hours a day. This makes other people on other shows crazy, but we do an intense 4 hours on Zoom a day, and the rest of the day I'm either in editing, and people are writing, and people are doing research, or the writer who wrote the episode that's shooting is on set. But it's amazing what you can get done in 4 hours if you're really focused, and you're not then spending 2 hours ordering and consuming lunch.
Right. So this idea that so Elsbeth is a murder mystery every week, and they all take place in New York City in a New York City that I would like to live in.
Yes.
And it's not Dog Day Afternoon. It's a very different world. The idea that you would fill every episode with other than Gilded Age, which also has a lot of Broadway stars on it, a very different kind of show, where did the idea come from? Not just to it's called stunt casting in a way, it just means casting people that are recognizable, not that they're not fantastic at what they do, but the idea of being super theater centric in that way. And Laurie Metcalf, who is very famous in two lanes, if not three. Um, Talk about the idea of that all the guest stars, it's like the Love Boat, right? Like it's so exciting in that way.
Well, partly it's just that we're in New York, and the New York acting pool, and I think the best of the New York acting pool is people who also do theater. And our show is pretty theatrical. We have a bunch of playwrights on the staff. Brian Gollyboff, Leah Nanako Winkler, and me. We all write plays. Wade Dooley, our room assistant, is also a playwright. Um, and we write theatrical dialogue. And Cary comes from the theater, and Wendell Pierce comes from the theater. So it's just natural for us. I think our tone has the kind of comic tone that lends itself to a kind of verbal dexterity and just sort of a twinkle in the eye that theater actors know how to bring, and pace, all those things. But also, it's just I have to say it's also just my taste. I mean, those are the people I love. The way our show is structured is that we only have um, two regulars right now, and Cara Patterson is now a guest star. She was a regular the first two seasons, and so we have one big lump of money to get our special guest star, who is almost always the murderer, but not always. Um, but to attract all these other great people, a lot of them theater people, we have to do two things. One, we have to make the material attractive to them, give them fun things to do, and also have created, I think, and you'll hear this from people who've been on our show, a very positive work environment. I mean, it comes from Cary, but also Gail Barringer, our line producer. You know, we do not let anyone misbehave. And everybody who works on the show is really enjoying their job and brings something extra to it. And if you watch the show, you'll see like every bit of design and like and Dan Lawson's costumes and even the props and all the callbacks. You know, a lot of the callbacks, we have little things that call back to earlier episodes. Sometimes it's like the prop manager says, you know what, we could use that thing from episode 211. You know, everybody is having fun. And so I
Yeah.
think that that's why we're able to get such great people and they're willing to come back repeatedly.
How do you think, because there's so much streaming, there's so much content for people to watch.
Too much.
It's a lot. And
Possibly. Yeah.
obviously, it's a rare thing, not since Rhoda, right? Like who was a beloved character on the Mary Tyler Moore show. Look it up, my younger listeners. It was a very popular show. Um, if you think of Elsbeth, who people knew from another King show, um, the idea of having her have her own show. Carrie Preston is a beloved actress who
Hmm.
broke out as a supporting character on another show. It's a rare thing that these things actually happen, that there's the idea of someone who's not already, number one on a call sheet, becoming number one on another call
Yeah.
sheet, right? It's not like Juliana Margulies is going to go do another show. So, can you talk a little bit about the King's idea? And bringing you into it of like we can make this work, and yet it did break through. And how did that happen aside from it being great, because a lot of things are great? What's your thought about it?
Well, Carrie played Elsbeth first on The Good Wife, and I think Robert had seen her in a small role in a movie and just loved her. And
Yeah,
the name Elsbeth Tassioni, I think, was changed like the night before they shot the first scene because another name didn't clear. Like it was just one of those things,
crazy. Yeah,
The tote bags were a last minute decision, but she just hit. And the audience loved it. And then they brought her back. The character came back in The Good Fight, which I worked
right.
on for 5 years. And I actually wrote the last two episodes that the character of Elsbeth appeared in on The Good Fight. I think that may have been one of the reasons why the Kings thought,
Right. You knew her, you wrote,
yeah,
the voice well.
yeah.
Yeah,
But I think also it's just, what's so great about it is that, I mean, you are never going to meet anybody who like resents Carrie Preston. You know what I mean? She is such a professional.
yes.
She is such a sort of source of light and joy and kindness that,
Yeah,
I think everybody feels, oh, yes, they gave her her own show. How great is that? And I want to be in her presence every week.
yeah,
Nathan Lane, who did the season premiere for us, season two, my opera episode, actually.
yeah.
He had played a recurring part on The Good Wife, an accountant, Clark something, and he had scenes with Carrie, and he remembers saying to her on the set, they really should do a spin-off for you in this character. And then, of course, it was like, 10 years later, it happened.
They did. And could you feel, forgive me, have you been with it from like episode one, season one?
The Kings wrote the pilot,
Okay,
and set up the pilot, and then they asked me to be the showrunner if the show happened. I
okay.
so I read the pilot, gave my thoughts on some things a few that they took that to adjust and things in the pilot, and I was on set a number of days when they shot the pilot. But then after that, I've been the showrunner from that
Okay,
point.
so almost day one.
Yeah.
Uh, so in you've written a lot of television. You've worked with extraordinary people. Carrie, exceptionally extraordinary. The premise is so much fun. The idea of a modern day Columbo played by Carrie Preston, all of it is amazing. There is also, you mentioned the word tone. I feel like so much of the tone, I saw is on the page, but also your editors are extraordinary. I mean, tone is a big word and hard to define, and something either has a brilliant tone that comes through our screen and we get it and understand it, or it doesn't, and yours does, right? But
Well, I would have to say, one of the great things about getting to do this over, like we're right now, we're shooting what is our 45th episode, and
incredible.
over time, like I just edited the latest episode that we went through my cut. Um, Usually now I'm able to edit an episode, taking the director's cut and doing whatever I do to it, in 2 days. I mean, the editors and we just all know what the show is, and we have a shorthand now, and the scripts get rewritten less also because we all in our bones know what feels like Elsbeth.
It's thrilling. And I guess just to just harp on this one question, how quickly were you like, oh my God, you guys, like we're connecting. We have found our audience and they keep coming back.
Oh, I never know that. I never feel that. I mean, it's tricky now. It's hard to know because ratings are complicated because
Yeah,
our linear ratings, they're good, but they're not fantastic. But then we more than double our ratings in the 7 days of, Paramount Plus and
right,
DVR and however people watch shows now.
right,
So
right.
you never quite know. But we do get a lot. Yeah, it was we're in the middle of our third season and we just still got on a bunch of best of the year lists, which is very flattering for a show that's, had 45 episodes now or 40 episodes. Yeah.
It's incredible. I know that you in a few minutes are going to be on Zoom or however, I think your writer's room starts at 1 and it's 12:45. So I'm going to
Yes.
let you like have a moment to like do whatever you need to do. Um, to that point, actors have a lot of rituals that they do backstage before they walk on stage to do a show. So at 12:45, 15 minutes before you're about to join your writer's room, 3 seasons in, the middle of the third season, all the scripts that you've written, like what happens to you? What's on your mind now as you're about to sit with your incredible, talented group?
Oh, other than the latest problems with my kids.
Yes.
You know,
There's got to be a way to put that in the writing. Yeah.
I do a quick review of, first of all, checking email and what anything, what part of being a showrunner is you have to be answering questions and picking and approving things all day long. So I have to make sure there's nothing outstanding that people are waiting for me on. And I do also think about, okay, what are we doing today?
Uh-huh.
Where are we in the script? We're in the story we're breaking, or is there any other matter, anything that needs to be adjusted for production? And just having a basic agenda. I always start the writer's room by going through everything that where we are on every episode leading up to the one we're working on. And that's sort of you just like I'm very organized, which helps in this job, obviously. And so I just have to feel like everything's under control.
Well, gosh, me too. I'd like to feel like everything was under control. I'm just going to have my life be run like a writer's room. Okay, Jonathan Tolins. Uh, I am I am deeply, deeply inspired by all the ways in which your work has influenced both pop culture and theater lovers, and how your intelligence and unique sense of humor and your absolute dexterity with language uh, has just influenced like my life in so many ways as a consumer of what you do. It's very exciting to see like how it just keeps going and twisting and turning in all these ways. And you do have a beautiful family and two incredible kids and a glorious husband who you work with a lot also and are able to create incredible shows and musicals with together. Before I let you go, so congrats on a life well
Thank you.
lived. You're
And that phone
welcome.
ringing was, of course, my son who probably heard me, make a joke about him. So there.
Yes, and he did not like that.
Yeah.
And that's also what happens when you're in the public eye. Um, is there a little known fact about you that you can share?
Here's the little known fact about me. I am related to you through my father's family, but on my mother's side, I am a distant cousin, and not that distant, to the great Arthur Lawrence. My Arthur Lawrence's father and my grandfather were first cousins.
That's
And
incredible.
so and I only met him once. It was shortly after the Twilight of the Golds had been on Broadway, and there was some Dramatists Guild function, and I met him, and I said, Mr. Lawrence, my name is John Tolins. I think we're related. I wrote the Twilight of the Golds, and he went, I know who you are. And then someone else got his attention, and that's the only conversation we ever had.
I feel like you got out at the best time. Also, your mom's maiden name, isn't it Levine?
It's Levine, and Arthur Lawrence's name is actually Levine. And one of the things that I found interesting in his very candid, truth-telling autobiography is that he never mentions when he changed his name.
It just happened. It
Yeah.
just happened. So this is Alana Lawrence signing off from my Little Known Facts podcast. John,
Levine's everywhere.
everywhere we go, I adore you. Thank you for doing this. And we are going to have dinner soon. We're going to make that.
Yes,
I'm
we
sorry I
are.
had to reschedule. Love to Cary, your beautiful kids, your glorious mom, all the people. Have a
And we
great
never
day.
mentioned that Dominic is Jack Swanson in the Elsbeth universe.
I love that character so much, and it's fun to be on the subway with him when people, that's how you know how many people watch Elsbeth. He's done a lot of things, and that's up there on the Jack Wilson.
Jack Wilson,
Um,
yes. I'm sorry. So I think we changed his name at some point. I can't
it's Jack,
remember.
I
Too
think it's
many
Jack
episodes.
Wilson in
Yes,
the
Jack
end.
Wilson's right.
All right, well, hopefully Jack Wilson will be back to help save lives and nunneries in the
Yes.
future. All right, bye, sweetie. Thank you again.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.